Okay, welcome everyone. Today's webinar is hosted by DBHR through the Washington State Healthcare Authority, and this is an interactive training. We encourage you to ask questions and participate throughout the session. Just a quick note about AI. Please note that the use of automated note-taking bots or similar tools during the Washington FCS events or meetings requires prior approval, and unauthorized use of such tools is prohibited to ensure the privacy and confidentiality of all attendees. Also, any recording that is created through AI is not recognized as an official recording of this session, and we do reserve the right to exit trainees from the training if they're using AI to take notes without prior approval or using AI to record the session. So just a little bit of housekeeping, more housekeeping that we have decided. If you've been with us for a while, we used to mail out all of the information. We've transitioned to a different approach where we are now putting the resources, today's PowerPoint, any other resources that we happen to use in the chat. And I put it in a few times already, so if you've already joined, you should have access to the materials. I will be putting it in there again towards the end of the session for anyone who's joining late. And just as a reminder that the recording of today's session will be available on the HCA FCS channel, which is hyperlinked here, about 2 weeks after the session. So you'll have the recording of this session that you can access using this hyperlink, which you'll have in the materials that are in the chat. So we are going to get started. We've got quite a bit to cover in our hour together. Just to introduce myself, my name is Joni Dolce. I'm with the Integrated Employment Institute at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and our institute is charged with helping organizations and behavioral health agencies implement employment and education related services within their current structure. So we do a lot of work around training staff in best practices around employment and education services, and also around implementation of those practices. So we've been working with Washington for a number of years, doing several webinars throughout the month. One of the webinars is the Innovations in Career Services, which is today, and it's the second Thursday of every month. So please join us. We have a nice kind of cohort of people who tend to join pretty regularly, and variety of topics. And if there are topics that you're interested in, please, at the end of today's session, I'll add a link and a QR code to our survey. Please let us know what types of sessions you would like to see in the future. But we'll get started. Today we're talking about using motivational interviewing skills, particularly the skills of OARS, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries in employment services. And this came out of, I guess, 2 months ago. I did a session on listening for change talk in employment services. And again, in that brief hour, we were able to address some of those strategies to really listen for change talk and help in the planning. It was very clear that having something around OARS and looking at those specific techniques in employment services was very evident. So we're going to define open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries in MI. I'll also do a very brief overview or just very quick discussion about motivational interviewing. We're also going to observe the use of OARS. I have a couple of different videos, and cross our fingers, they'll work fine, and we'll be able to observe someone practicing OARS in a simulated counseling session. And then we're also, we typically have been doing maybe more large group activities. So I have a couple of activities where we can practice using OARS kind of as this larger group. And so yeah, let's get started. So I want to begin by providing you with some background on motivational interviewing. And this sort of just goes through some of what I'm going to be talking about. Since 1990, there have been over 1,200 published studies of MI, about 200 randomized clinical trials. This amount of research really reflects the variety of practice settings and modalities and different behavior changes and professions, including behavioral health services. So MI has been researched and studied throughout many different types of practice settings and different modalities, including using in employment and behavioral health settings. Motivational interviewing was originally developed by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick about 30 years ago for its use in addictions, um, specifically around smoking cessation at that time. And it began in part as an alternative to more traditional directive and sometimes confrontational approaches used in substance use treatment. It's really grown since then to support people making changes in a variety of settings. It's practiced in many behavioral healthcare settings. It offers a really effective framework for behavioral health services, employment services, housing services that really assist individuals in making changes. It's goal-directed, person-centered, strengths-based, collaborative. There's a focus on hope and optimism. So it really aligns nicely with employment services and housing services, where we're working with individuals and people who are interested in achieving goals, whether that might be employment goals, education goals, housing goals. So let's move into our kind of meat of our topic today. Which is really about communication, using those specific communication skills, those OARS. But let's begin by reviewing some foundational community skills. While these are not strictly motivational interviewing skills, they are important to review as many of the motivational interviewing skills build on these. Um, as you know, how we say things can be just as important as what we say. Um, so I'll ask you a couple of questions here. How do you know that someone is listening to you? How do you know when you're talking to someone, whether it's your own provider or um, any other person in your life? How do you know that person is listening to you? You can use the chat or unmute your mic. Peek here in the chat. Eye contact, yes. Eye contact and head nods, absolutely. Visual eye contact, if over the phone or remote active listening. Specific question about what's been said, paraphrasing, restating what I've said for clarification, eye contact, responding here and there, facial reactions that tell me they're connecting to what I'm saying. Absolutely, yes. Um, so the acronym SOLAR that you see here on the slide outlines some of the behaviors in kind of a nice little, we like our acronyms in behavioral health. Outline some of the behaviors that can communicate to others that we're paying attention and we're listening. And SOLAR stands for squaring, open posture, leaning in, eye contact, and relaxed. So squaring means sitting facing the person, if you're in person, with your shoulders sort of squared toward the person you're speaking with, similar to what you see here on the slide. Open posture means sort of leaving your body open to the other person with your arms and legs uncrossed. That's suggests an open posture. Leaning in means kind of angling your body very slightly forward to show an interest. If we can make sure we're muted, thank you. To show an interest in what the person is saying, kind of leaning forward, similar to what many of you mentioned in the chat, eye contact, looking someone in the eyes, or instead of focusing elsewhere, maintaining eye contact. And relaxed means to really physically calm your body and your mind to be comfortable in your space. So many of what you all mentioned in the chat very much align with solar. So we're not going to get into too much of this, because I do want to get into more of the techniques, but kind of keeping in the back of your mind when you're meeting with someone, a lot of these um, skills help the person know that you're listening and they can visually see that you're paying attention to them. So I suggest, if when you're kind of meeting with someone, even informally with friends, family, um, colleagues, maybe practicing this. And if you're comfortable asking for feedback, asking the person that you're talking to or meeting with for feedback about how you might have exhibited these skills. So we're going to get right into talking about OARS. Now that we've looked at some of the foundational communication skills, including our body language and other skills that convey we're listening, let's talk about more interactive techniques to convey that we're listening and that are related to our verbal communication. The four core motivational interviewing skills are open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And OARS is an acronym, another acronym used in motivational interviewing to remember these skills. We're going to go through each of these core skills and have a little bit of time to practice, but it's mostly going to be um, interactive here in the chat and unmuting your mic just for the time purposes, but you probably do some version of them already, maybe without knowing it. But we can all improve with more practice, and today's session will focus on these areas. So instead of using closed-ended questions, it's generally better to use open-ended questions. And open-ended questions encourage the person to share. Um, it allows the person to provide more information and encourages really a richer discussion. When asking open-ended questions, you're listening more and speaking less. You're allowing the speaker, the person that you're meeting with, to lead the direction of the conversation, which really reinforces those the spirit of MI, partnership and collaboration of motivational interviewing. What so when we look at open-ended questions, they open the door for the deeper discussion. An example might be, what would you like from services? You can hear that it isn't a yes or no response or a very brief one answer response. It allows the person to really give you a little bit more information than maybe a closed-ended question that might be, uh, are you interested in participating in services? Then you're just getting from the person yes or no. This type of example, what would you like from services, or what would you like from supported employment, from supportive housing, allows the person to really give you a richer, deeper response. What are some examples that you have of different open-ended questions that you've used in employment services, um, housing, whatever service modality you're currently working in? What are some examples? You can use the chat or unmute your mic of open-ended questions.
If I could, in the program that I work in, oh, sorry for my camera.
No,
We
that's fine.
we do WISE, wraparound behavioral therapy.
Hmm.
And part of that process is collaborating with the family to create what's called the family vision, which is essentially what they want their life to look like, um, in a perfect world. And so when I'm
Yep.
working with youth, I just ask them, I'm like, what's a perfect day look like?
Love
You
that.
wake up,
Perfect
how do
day
you,
question.
yeah.
So what kinds of responses do they usually give, Shannon?
Well, I'm working with adolescents, and so usually they're like, well, I don't know. And then I'll ask more questions,
Yes.
something along the line of, it's like, okay, well, when you wake up, do you want to feel well rested? Then I'll ask more closed-ended questions to
Yeah.
help kind of, you know, collect some
Figure out the
ingredients.
direction. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And maybe sprinkle in some reflections if necessary, which we're going to get to. That's great though. What's a perfect day like for you? And sometimes sitting in silence a little bit and allowing the person to really ponder that and think about that. I have a hard time. I have to really practice not wanting to jump in and provide more questions, but really letting the person think about it.
yeah.
Thank you. That's a great example. So I'm looking here in the chat, lots of good examples. And this is why this is called a learning community. This isn't just a webinar. This is really a learning community where you're learning from each other. So kind of looking in the chat now, I would suggest peek in here and look to see what people are saying. But people are talking about what types of support would work best for you, giving a chance for the person to really respond with what's worked in the past. What are some of the barriers you've experienced when job searching? Yes, kind of allows the person that opportunity to really share what they are and dig a little bit deeper. What was your most recent job like for you? I'm just going to read through a few of these. Can you describe what that looks like? And sometimes I ask them to draw a picture of what that looks like. Yes, if someone has a hard time describing in words, maybe there are other ways um, to give that description. I know we have like a family group chat and I have like young adult kids, so we communicate a lot by memes and different videos. And even if the person's unable to draw, you could say like, "Oh, have you seen like a video or something that would illustrate it or give a little bit more information?" So kind of think creatively. When was the last time you felt fulfilled or intrigued? Yes, these are some great responses. So thinking about open-ended questions, we really want to stay away from those more like short answer, closed-ended, that the person just asks yes or no. And a lot of reason why we want to stay away from that is sometimes you're just, if you're asking so many questions, what does that begin to feel like for the person? If you're just asking several closed-ended questions when maybe one or two open-ended questions would suffice, asking so many closed-ended questions really feels a little bit like you're interrogating. I mean, that's a very strong word, but it doesn't feel as natural and comfortable. Open-ended questions are geared toward really evoking and building that relationship, evoking from the person, what do they want? Um, they're all open-ended questions are also really helpful in trying to get from the person um, their reasons for making a change and trying to kind of elicit and get from them their own change talk. So here are some examples. Um, Delaney, did you want to say something or should I'm gonna just mute for now, but certainly let me know if you have anything to add. But here are some examples. Why do you want to make this change? How might you go about making this change in order to succeed, whatever that change might be? Maybe it's going back to school, maybe it's going back to work, maybe it's changing um, housing situations. What are the three best reasons to do it? So maybe if someone is having a difficult time really answering some of the more general, broad, open-ended questions, maybe asking for, three reasons to do it or a couple of reasons to do it. On a scale from 0 to 10, how important would you say it is for you to make this change? Why are you at a 6 and not a 0? Kind of gets to their belief about whether the change would be possible and positive for them. What do you think you'll do? So these are just some questions to help kind of get you started thinking about the importance of asking open-ended questions. But again, be careful. You don't want to ask too many questions, even if they are open-ended. According to the spirit of MI, the purpose of asking questions is really to get from the person, evoke change talk and build relationships. And too many questions might interfere with that goal. We're going to talk about reflections in just a bit, but the motivational interviewing rule of thumb is generally to ask an open-ended question, then reflect back what the person says. We're going to talk about reflections. Even better might be to offer two reflections before asking another question. But for now, the most important thing to remember is that asking too many questions, even open-ended ones, can feel less like a discussion and more like an interrogation. So we're just zipping through, but we have an hour, so I thought I'd give you sort of the quick overview and then leave you with all of this, all of these resources and additional resources and references that you can follow up for more information. But we're going to go through this and talk about reflections. Bill Miller, who I had mentioned, one of the developers and founders of motivational interviewing, said, people, his direct quote was, people don't want to be fixed, they want to be heard. And reflections are a way to let people know that you've heard them. So we're going to skip affirmations for just a moment and skip to these reflections. They really are a communication skill that can serve a few purposes. Reflections allow you to share with the person the message that you received from them and check to make sure you understood it correctly, helping to address some different communication errors that might exist. Reflections can also allow the person to hear what you've shared back to them, almost like a mirror reflecting back the explicit or implicit meaning of their words. So they're able to hear back what you've just shared. Reflections can demonstrate that you're listening and that you care about understanding the person's experience. And this helps to build empathy. Reflections can also allow you to emphasize parts of what the person has said and reinforce their change talk, which we talked about a couple of months ago. Listening for that change talk, and reflections help to hear it and reflect back so the person hears that on their own. Reflections can help minimize the writing reflex, which I think we talked about in that session a couple of months ago. That writing reflex is really that like urge or that reflex of the provider to want to give advice or tell the person, make a judgment or offer too many suggestions. Reflections allow you to reflect back what the person says in their own words or in fresh words so that you're resisting that urge to just give advice or make suggestions immediately without really hearing what the person is telling you. Reflections are brief statements. They're not questions, so they should inflect your voice down at the end, not up like you're asking a question. Reflections should not be longer than the person's statement that you're reflecting back. And you can form reflections in different ways to serve different purposes. So we're going to talk about some simple reflections, and then we'll also get into a couple of other more complex, advanced reflections, so that you'll have a few different options and formulas, if you will, in your toolbox. So you might reflect back this guess or hypothesis about maybe what the implicit message is that the person is communicating to you. Reflections may seem simple, but they're difficult to do well, and they do take lots of practice. So, after today, I would encourage you to practice, to meet with your supervisor, meet with colleagues, meet with others, mentors, whoever else you can to really begin practicing some of these reflections. Use some of the resources that I'll provide at the end. There might be times when you don't quite get the reflection right, but it'll provide an opportunity for you to clarify your understanding and check your understanding and any assumptions that you might have made the person will tell you. Um, you can acknowledge your error. You can ask for clarification and try again. You could say, I'm sorry that I got that wrong. Um, can you tell me a little bit more about what you just said so I can try to so you can try to reflect that back again more accurately. Like it said here, there's no penalty for missing. The person wants you to understand them. So let's move into some examples. So now that we understand what reflections are, let's look at some beginning kind of stems or starters um, that you can use to form reflections. On the slide are some examples of basic starters or stems for reflections. And remember, reflections are statements, so they can't start with a question words like who, what, when, where, how, why. Um, these are some good stems to begin with, but as you get more comfortable using these, you can begin to substitute your own if they work better for you and in your work setting. But for now, these represent a good start to forming some of those simple reflections. So when someone's giving you content or talking, you might say something like sounds like, and then kind of reflect back what you heard. What I heard you say is, or let me get this straight, or so if I heard you correctly, or you sound, or so what you mean is, and try to get from the person. Can you think of others? What are some additional starters or stems for reflections that you might have used? You can use the chat or unmute your mics. For you, the situation you're facing goes like, yes, I love that, Mel. Um, it's in the chat. For you, the situation you're facing goes like, and you kind of reflect back what it might be. If I understand you correctly, yes. So these are just some to get you started. Again, you don't have to robotically use these. You can, once you're more familiar with MI and using OARS and reflections, you'll be able to identify what works best in your setting. But it does take practice. If I understand you correctly, let's see. I heard that you express this um, short but more casual. So, yes, I mean, if you have developed a relationship with a person and you feel like just that one word so would prompt them to give you more, absolutely. Um, just so I know we're on the same page, what I heard is yes, excellent. So peek in the chat before you leave today's session when you're because there's been a lot of great suggestions and examples from your colleagues here. We're going to move on to talking about simple reflections. So there are different types and different levels of reflections. For now, and then just a bit we'll move into a little bit more complex, but nothing too advanced. But we're going to focus on these simple reflections. And the purpose of simple reflections is to really let the person know that you're listening, that you understand what they're saying. And there are two kinds of simple reflections, if you will. Repetition is really repeating back what you heard using their words, almost mirroring what they're saying. And this may sound a little strange, but it is an effective way to show them that you're listening. Rephrasing is repeating back what they said, but in your words. Um, so repeating back to the person what you heard them say, but using your own words instead of theirs. So I'm gonna give a statement as if, I'm talking to you and you're my counselor or employment consultant. So listen to what I'm saying and then think of a way to rephrase what I'm saying. So you can use the chat or unmute your mic. I'm going to try a different route driving home tonight after work. Does someone have a rephrase, repeat back what I said, but in your words?
Can you say it again?
Yes, I'm going to try a different route driving home tonight after work. I'm going to try a different route driving home tonight after work. What would just be a rephrasing of that? Someone said, okay, it's coming in. It sounds like you're going to take a different way home tonight. Remember, no question mark. Just that's one of the things that we really want to be careful with. We're not really asking a question, we're reflecting back. Um, oh, you're going to try a new route home. So just again, inflect the voice down, not up like a question. So after work, you're going to switch it up and go home a different way. Again, no question, but yes, that's a great reflection. So what I'm hearing you say is you'll be taking a new route home today after work. And then that gives me, the person who told you that, I can say something like, yeah, they've had a lot of construction over the last couple of weeks, and it's just a little bit longer, but I guess it'll be okay. Then maybe you reflect that back. It sounds like you're driving a different route may be helpful for you. I hope your new route home will be good. So that sounds like a good affirmation too. So again, use your colleagues, use your supervisors, and really practice some of these skills. It takes some time, and you want to come off as genuine and sincere, and not robotic. So it does take some practice. But good, those reflections were nice. So reflecting content, responses that reflect content are really the most basic of the more complex responses. When you reflect content, you're just reflecting back the essence of what the person has just shared with you by using your own words. So similar to rephrasing, but maybe more of a paraphrase. You do this to convey that you're listening, confirm or clarify your understanding, and to encourage the person to continue speaking and provide more information. With content reflections, you're focused on the ideas that are being shared. You're not addressing the emotions yet or the feelings that are being conveyed. That's coming up next. So when we think about reflecting back what you're sharing in your own word, um, we're going to have a little practice in just a minute, but I want to go through the different types that we're going to introduce today of the complex reflections. A second one is reflecting feeling. Feeling reflections convey a deeper understanding of not only what the person is telling you, but also the emotion connected to their words and their body language and the tone of their voice. For example, you may be able to see that someone is upset by their facial expression, or maybe their posture, or other nonverbal cues. When reflecting feeling, you want to identify the emotion that the person is feeling or that you sense that they're feeling. Um, Once you identify that emotion, you can test whether or not you got it right by making a feeling reflection, such as you feel angry, you feel frustrated, you feel upset, you feel worried. And again, you can get a sense of that emotion by the person's body language, by their posture, by the tone of their voice, and also the words that they're using. You can also use alternative phrases like, that makes you feel frustrated, or it's got you feeling down, it's got you feeling exhausted, it's got you feeling confident. It could be positive. It's got you feeling confident, got you feeling excited. Um, in addition to reflecting the feeling word itself, you really want to gauge and reflect the intensity of that feeling. So for the feeling word happy, that kind of suggests a medium intensity level of that feeling, right? where if if we were to reflect back satisfied, that might be more of like a lower intensity, depending on how the person is telling you, what they're telling you. Elated suggests a high intensity. Um, so kind of gauging not just what the feeling is, but also the intensity of that feeling. If you're able to gauge that. Once you make a feeling reflection, the person may acknowledge that feeling that feeling and or that intensity level might be correct or incorrect. They might say something like, uh, no, I feel a little bit more than just happy. I'm really feeling just exuberant. That's an example, but the person, it, deve- when you're developing this relationship and building this relationship, the person can tell you if you've missed, and that's okay. And again, um, we're just really wanting the person to get a good understanding that we're listening and we're understanding. So I do have like a few minute video that we can look at. Um, and this will probably be the only video, but I've included a couple more in here before we start practicing. And the practice is really going to be in the chat reflections. Let's watch a quick video of Anthony with a person he's working with, using some simple and complex reflections. So I might not have us watch the whole thing. So if it ends abruptly, that's just me doing that intentionally. But as we're listening, Anthony is the counselor. I want you to listen for what reflections he's using, and what other listening skills that we talked about, maybe those solar skills. So kind of jot down or try to remember what are those, or write in the chat, what are some of those reflections that Anthony is using with the individual he's counseling, and what other um, listening skills are you observing? So if somebody could give me like a nice little thumbs up when all this, let me make sure that I'm sharing the sound. Okay. Oops. There it is. Okay. So just let me know if it's coming up okay on your end. Can you see it? Okay, good.
Kati and I have been meeting for the past few months to discuss her interests in going back to school after being laid off from her job. Good morning, Kati. I know when we met last week, we were talking a little bit more about your decision to go back to school. So can you tell me a little bit more about your progress on that?
Well, I've been having some problems getting in touch with the person who's in charge of admissions at the school that I'm interested in.
It's been difficult trying to contact the school.
Yes, I can't seem to locate the email of the person, and the website is so disorganized, it's hard to find anything on it.
It's been hard to find information that you need.
Yes, I can't remember the person's full name, and it's making me incredibly frustrated. I don't even want to keep looking.
You want to stop looking for this information.
Yes, I want to stop looking because I'm feeling so upset and disappointed that I can't find what I need. They're just so disorganized.
You're feeling discouraged because you can't find this information.
Yes, I'm starting to think that maybe I'm just not cut out for this school.
You feel defeated.
Not necessarily defeated, just questioning my decision to attend this school. They're terrible and I'm just over it.
It sounds like such a chaotic situation, Kati. You don't even see yourself being there anymore.
No, that's not it. I know they really have a great reputation for the arts, and that's just been my passion for so long.
It's a good school, and it matches your interests.
Yes, it's a great.
Okay, so we're going to move back to presentation, and I see that we have some information there in the chat. Okay, we're back on the presentation. Everyone can see it. Just give me a little thumbs up or yes, great. Okay, so I see some information here in the chat that okay, it's been difficult trying to contact the school. Yes, that was a reflection that Anthony reflected back. It's been hard to find information that you need. Yes, it's been hard to find information you need. You want to stop looking. You're feeling discouraged because you can't find this information. You feel defeated. Sounds like a chaotic situation and you don't see yourself being there anymore. He's showing good communication, body language. Yes. It's a good school and it matches your interests. So kind of reflecting back, maybe some information from previous sessions. Yes. Um, yes, he prompts further explanation from her without asking any questions. Yes, that's great. I'm glad that you picked up on that. The client responds to each reflection by confirming or correcting the reflection. Yes. So you were able to see a lot of that in action. Um, if we were to play a little bit longer, you'd see, some more advanced skills being used. But again, you could use these recordings in your team meetings and other way like staff trainings and you can um, you know pull out what some of those skills were that were used and in the other recordings that are included. So let's move on and practice as best as we can in such a large group. Um, Again, use the chat, unmute your mics. Or if you want to raise your hand, I'll unmute the mic. So provide a content reflection. Remember, a content reflection is more of that paraphrasing back the content that's here, not the emotions, not the feeling, more just the content. So I'm going to read the statement and you can use the chat or unmute your mic. I just don't understand my mom. One minute she tells me to live close to home, and the next she says, live and wherever you want. What would be a reflection back, a content reflection? We have someone here. You want your mom to communicate more clearly about your living situation. You don't understand your mother's true feelings. So your mother is confusing you. Oh, so much is coming in here. Confusing you in terms of your living situation. You wish you could better understand your mom and what she wants. Your mom is giving you contradictory information. That sounds confusing. She wants you there, but she also says you should go. How does that make you feel? Excellent. So you've combined an open-ended question with a reflection. You're confused by your mom's behavior. Yes, you feel overwhelmed by the task to get ready to build your resume. Oh, somebody's jumped ahead. Um, so let's look at the next one. I really want to start applying for jobs, but there are so many things I need to do to get my resume ready. How would you reflect that back? So we have, you feel overwhelmed by the task to get ready to build your resume. Yes, perfect. So that's, you're kind of delving into a little bit of feeling and emotions. Um, so if we want to just reflect back content, we want to really just reflect back what the person is saying, but in our own fresh words. So I've introduced the feeling reflection, and we're going to get to that again, or next. So wow, there's a lot coming in. When your resume is completed, you'll start applying for jobs. Yes, sounds like there's a lot for you to do. I see that you want to start applying for jobs, but there are many things you need to do. In MI, they really recommend not using the word but, so that people can see both sides of that ambivalence. So for that situation or that reflection back, I see that you want to start applying for jobs, and there are also many things that you need to do. So kind of using and, but yes, these are great. I've been thinking about attending a support group, so I looked up some that are available in my neighborhood. How would you reflect back? Maybe we'll just have one or two responses. You research local support groups you might attended. Yes, yep, kind of using your own fresh words and reflecting that back. So let's look at feeling. So again, this is where you want to reflect back the emotions that you're hearing. And again, we're not really seeing the person, so we can't visually see what their emotions or feelings or posture might look like, but um, the use of exclamation marks might be indicative of how they're feeling. So how would you reflect feeling back using a feeling word? Remember, you feel, or it sounds like you're feeling. So I've been waiting for over a year to enroll in college and I can't wait. And you could even move on to the next one too. Yep, sounds like you're excited to start school. You're so excited about college. You're eager to get started on higher education. Yes. I can't do anything right as far as my teachers are concerned. They return my assignments because they say they're sloppy and incomplete. Or even this third one, you can begin thinking about some coworkers invited me to a party this weekend, but I don't know if I should mix work and fun. You know, what would be the emotion or the feeling um, that you want to reflect back? It sounds like you're feeling a little frustrated with school. Or feedback you're getting from your teachers. I see that you're feeling defeated. You're feeling discouraged by your teacher's feedback. Sounds like you're disappointed in how your teachers are reacting to your turned in works. You're hesitant. You're worried that it's not a good idea to mix work and fun with coworkers. Yes, excellent. So obviously we're going very quickly, but um, great job. So the final, and we'll just talk briefly about this. Reflecting meaning is really kind of merging a feeling and then also the content. So you feel worried because coworkers are inviting you out after work. You feel apprehensive because teachers are, grading your work as incomplete or whatever that. So it really digs a little bit deeper. Um, so you're kind of reflecting back the feeling word. And this is a formula used by Karcuff, and they have a communications, um, they do a lot of communications work. So this formula, you feel because, is one of those formulas that just kind of helps you think about blending those two together. So we don't really have time to really talk, get some of these responses, but this could be good kind of applied work after today's session to go through this and think about how you would respond as a meaning reflection. You feel because. So maybe this first one, I'll just give an example. My mom has been taking me to my job this past month, but now she says she doesn't have the time to drop me off every morning. I might reflect back a meaning as you feel upset because your mom won't drive you to work. And then it gets the person kind of, again, thinking about that. So again, I think we're going to have to table this activity, but think about what are some of these statements that you hear from people participating in services. Because I want to move on to affirmations. So that's the A, and they are statements that recognize, highlight, or emphasize a person's strengths, abilities, skills, efforts, and behaviors, particularly those that are related to making their change. Affirmations are great ways to encourage relationship building, particularly in the beginning of the relationship. Affirmations help build confidence in the person that they can change. You want to always be looking for opportunities to affirm. They're a special kind of reflection. That's why we're kind of addressing it after reflections. So they're really reflecting back a strength or a skill or something positive that you've heard from the person. So commenting positively on an attribute or action might be something like, you're a survivor, you're a strong person, you've shown resilience in your life. A statement of appreciation might be something like, I really appreciate your openness and honesty today. Um, you might say something like, you were very supportive of your peers in group today, or I heard you talking to someone about, your own career, and that really built up the person, it seemed, in their belief and confidence that they could do it. An expression of hope and support might be, you'll do well in the interview today. You've practiced hard in the role plays, and you've made wonderful progress. Or you might reflect a value. You have a strong work ethic. You're passionate about advocacy. It's important to not confuse an affirmation with a compliment. Affirmations are specific and they're used to reinforce a behavior change and to acknowledge positive steps. Affirmations should never be, of course, backhanded or sarcastic. They should really be genuine and sincere. So you want to use these in combination. So combine open-ended questions and affirmations to really elicit change talk. So we're going to finish up with summaries, but before we do, I'm going to add the PowerPoint in the chat one more time. I had said I'd add it towards the end, just so people who came in a little bit later have it. So just give me one little minute to get down. Okay. So it's in the chat, and we're going to end on summaries. Summaries are similar to reflections, that they reflect back what the person has shared and they demonstrate that we're listening and that we understand what they're telling us, and it allows us to clarify any misunderstandings. They're a little bit different from reflections that we've discussed so far, because instead of focusing on one thing that's been shared, they try to pull together several pieces of the conversation, drawing together content from two or more prior statements, and they reflect how they fit together. Summaries really allow practitioners to reflect back any change talk that the person provides. They're useful in highlighting important elements of the discussion, and they encourage continued expression by the part of the person, and deepening of the discussion. They can highlight both sides of the person's ambivalence about the change. They can be used to begin a conversation or periodically throughout your exchange to check in with the person, and sort of organize any information that they've discussed so far. They're especially important when you want to transition from one topic to another topic and shifting that discussion, if the person becomes stuck. So they're a good way to transition, and if you're finishing up your conversation. So there are a few types. So we're going to, collecting summaries are used to collect information that's sort of related and reflect it back, kind of to keep the conversation going. Here's an example. Let me make sure I'm understanding what you've shared so far. You're interested in moving into an apartment by yourself because you've been having difficulties getting along with your roommates, and you're also concerned about feeling lonely if you live alone. So the summary kind of can combine several topics or several concerns that the person might have brought up, or several, bits of information. That could also link, making connections. So an example might be, as I hear you talking today about being afraid to get back into the workforce, I remember when we first met and you expressed fear about starting that training program that you just completed. So you're making connections, you're linking. And then finally, transitional kind of brings what has happened so far and transitions to a new task. An example might be, before we wrap up our discussion for today, let me summarize what I've heard so far, and you can let me know if I've missed anything. You haven't been feeling well physically, and it scares you because several members of your family have had serious health conditions. You think it might be time to see a doctor, and that's scary for you. So you're kind of um, brings like what has happened so far and transitions to maybe a new task. Maybe you want to begin talking about something else. So begin by stating that you're making a summary. Say something like, let me understand if I understand so far. Let me see if I understand so far. Here's what I've heard. Tell me if I've missed something. Invite the person to correct those errors in your understanding or if you've missed anything, and use open-ended questions. So this is another video that you can watch. And then if you were inclined to put it all together and practice, we won't be meeting again to review it, but if it's might be a nice activity if you wanted to kind of put it all together and practice when we leave today. So we've got a couple minutes left for questions, but I'm going to put my email here in the chat and encourage you to give me a shout. Let me know if you have questions about any of the material. I think my email is also on the contact sheet here, but we're at the end, and that usually means a survey. So if you could use the QR code. I'm also going to put the survey link here in the chat. Let's see if I might need to, let me just get that survey. I'll bring it up in just a minute. Thank you. If you have questions, you can use the last couple of minutes that we have to write those in the chat. And I will put the survey link and that QR code back up one more time. So thank you so much for all of the engagement, and I really appreciate all of the interactiveness from today. So thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder, we'll be sending everything out, and please note that that the newsletter will come out with upcoming trainings, and we really encourage you to let us know what you'd like to see on the agenda. Thank you.